Company team building event. Dave picked a dare, and he kissed my girlfriend of 7 years. Betty was caught off guard, but she held the back of his head and kissed him back. It got quiet around us and everyone looked at me. They thought I'd make a scene, but instead I started clapping. Nice kiss, do it again. Betty turned to look at me, clearly stiff. Dave, a bit out of breath, said, "Betty, you taste just the same." Betty looked confused and angry, thinking she misheard. Her eyes quickly cleared. She pushed Dave away and explained to me, "I'm just friends with Dave. I mistook him for you." Betty's the big boss, and no one dares speak against her. Some even made excuses for her. Betty drank too much. It's not surprising she mistook people. I looked at Dave's shiny lips and his thick brows and big eyes. He did look a bit like me. He gave me a challenging smile, like saying, "You've been with her all these years, so what? I'm back now, and she's really mine." I smirked. "It's already like this. Should I book you a room with a big bed?" Betty's face changed. "Calvin, it's just a game. Don't take it too seriously. Dave and I broke up ages ago. We have no relationship now. He's new in our company. He only has me to rely on. Can you not be so petty?" Everyone around had a curious expression at this. We're all professionals and everyone comes up alone. Nowhere have I seen anyone who can't survive in the workplace just because there's no one to rely on. Dave chuckled. "Betty, how can you say that about Calvin? He's not the type to hold grudges, right?" "Calvin?" I didn't say anything. Everyone shot us strange looks. It was clear to all Betty favored Dave and they couldn't get why she, being in the wrong, was the one getting mad. I saw something in Betty's eyes, a knowing look like she expected me to start a scene. In the past, whenever Dave was involved, I was like a lit firecracker. Betty seemed to be used to it, watching me lose it from a cold distance. Later she'd casually give me a gift or ask how I was, and I'd foolishly forgive. I can't count how many times we've fought over Dave since he came back from abroad. Our biggest fight had me threatening to leave home, only for her to text back asking where her favorite necklace was, and just like that, she'd win me over. During those cold wars, I'd be alone at night, sorting myself out, then running back to her with an apology in low spirit. In this relationship, I loved too much, and I was bound to be the loser. After all, whoever falls in love first is inevitably at a disadvantage. In college, Betty was a well-known beauty. It wasn't rare to see art students stopping her just to get her contact, but she'd turn them all down without a flinch. Yet this high and mighty flower suddenly asked me, "Want to go out?" Couldn't believe it. The campus goddess had become my girlfriend. I was a nobody who woke up one day to find a treasure. I was ecstatic, yet feared it was all a dream. Only seeing her number on my contact list made it real. I worried she'd forget me on a whim. So every day, I shared my life with her, brought her meals, trying to strengthen our bond. Yet she always reacted coolly to me. I never thought much of it. High and mighty figures were aloof to everyone. I believed that if I kept up my passion, she'd eventually warm up. But turns out she wasn't cold to me. She was just warm to someone else. Someone nudged me out of my thoughts, and I realized everyone was watching me. Betty said sternly, "Calvin, if you want to throw a fit, do it at home. Don't ruin the mood here." I didn't want to be the third wheel, so I said I'd head home. I left without looking at Betty's face, dark enough to drip ink. As I walked out, I heard Dave's voice. "Betty, do you think Calvin's mad at me again?" Betty reassured him gently, "No, it's just his odd temper." Without me there, the party livened up again. As I closed the door, I saw Betty and Dave linking arms, toasting each other. Betty was never that warm with me outside. Seeing their closeness, I wouldn't be surprised if they got a room tonight. They looked more like a loving couple. Under the guise of friendship, they relived their romance, testing my patience in subtle ways. Like when it's chilly, Dave wearing Betty's blazer, riding shotgun and feeding her snacks. They handle it well, and when I get upset, they say I'm overanalyzing. That night, I walked out of the hotel, with the cold wind slapping my face, blowing away my heavy heart. I switched off my phone and stuffed it in my pocket, buttoned up my coat, and walked into the chilling breeze. I realized then, maybe I could stop loving Betty. I went back to the villa. It was the first property Betty bought after making it. We designed it together, made it look like it does now. On the living room table were my favorite fruits. On the shelf next to the couch, the books she loved. I had already considered this place my home, loved it as much as I loved Betty. I gave a little self-deprecating laugh. They're in love. They don't need mine. I went upstairs, took a shower, and crashed into bed. Around 3 a.m. I heard noises downstairs. Betty was back. I thought she wasn't coming home tonight. Usually she'd come back late, drunk from some event. I'd always leave a light on in the living room, just so I could make her some hangover soup and run a hot bath the moment she got in. I guess with no light she wasn't used to it and she ended up stumbling. Betty pushed open the door, probably expecting me to start yelling hysterically. But she was met with nothing but silence. For once, she was surprised. This time I stayed calm. So calm, it didn't even seem like me. Betty could tell something was off. She stood by the bed, reeking of alcohol. Calvin? She called my name. I pretended to be asleep. She stared at me for a few minutes, then snorted and staggered out of the room, slamming the door behind her. The whole house shook. I knew she was mad I ignored her. She could be mad all she wanted because she thought I'd always try to make it up to her. The next day, after breakfast, Betty came downstairs rubbing her temples. A headache was her usual hangover residue. I felt bad for her, which is why I learned to make various hangover soups. Without even looking up, she ordered, "Make another sandwich. Dave really likes them. How hilarious. She's really treating me like their relationship's errand boy." Betty sat at the table, noticing it was bare. Not a thing on it for Dave, not even her own breakfast. She watched me carrying empty plates back and forth in the kitchen. She rarely spoke up, but now she did. "I got drunk last night. Dave drove me back. Almost crashed with his driving. I was packing lunch to take to work. I didn't listen too closely, and just replied without thinking, 'Oh, that's great.' Being dismissive, I didn't react like she expected. If I knew they nearly crashed before, I'd be all over her to get a full body checkup. I almost would have just tied her to me, but it didn't bother me this time. 'Stop messing around and make us breakfast. Fine, you can ride shotgun.' She sounded resigned, like she was giving me a handout. To her, I seemed to be fooling around. I stopped, looked at her. Ever since Dave joined the company, she's been picking him up, leaving me to bicker with Dave over the front seat. Betty made the call. Dave rides shotgun. He gets carsick. She never thought I get carsick too. Now she's acting like she's tossing breadcrumbs, like giving me the seat is doing me a favor. But I didn't want it anymore. "Nah, I'll take the subway to work." She was quiet. Probably couldn't even remember when I started taking the subway. Every day, waiting for Dave to get ready made us late, delaying my projects. So I stopped tagging along. Also, watching them flirt made me uncomfortable. I continued cleaning up, while Betty kept talking. "I might be home late tonight." "Okay. Dave's birthday, and he doesn't have many friends here. Invited me for a drink." "Okay." I was about to leave when she shouted, "Calvin!" I turned, confused. She stared, disbelief all over her face. "Why didn't you stop me this time?" I cocked my head, bewildered by her behavior today. Checked my watch, "I'm gonna be late. We'll talk when I'm back." I looked back as she stood there, surprised, because that's how she always treated me. Whenever we couldn't resolve an issue, she'd act nonchalant, leaving me on my own like I'm having a one-man show. I'd try to argue to get her attention, but she'd just find an excuse to leave. Sometimes, she didn't even bother with an excuse, just storming out and leaving me to stew. Closing the door, it hit me. Avoiding problems feels pretty good. No wonder she always does it. Today, Betty treated the office to desserts. Colleagues guessed, "Did we land a new project? Is Betty celebrating?" I chuckled. They were off. "It's Dave's birthday, remember?" Maybe she wanted to cheer Dave up under the guise of treating everyone. None of that mattered to me, though. Come afternoon, Betty texted me. "Did you like the cake?" I paused, surprised. Did she text the wrong person? Looked at the mango cake on my desk. Melted cream now. Now I noticed it was from my favorite dessert shop. Pricey, too. And you had to queue for ages. Betty really spared no expense for Dave. I ignored the message. Another one popped up. Your favorite blueberry flavor. I snorted. She definitely texted the wrong person. 'Cause the mango flavor was what I had. They handed me a blueberry initially, but Dave swapped it. He came to my desk. Whoa, where's my blueberry cake? Oh, here it is. He threw a box on my desk. Betty picked this just for me. It's her signature flavor. I hadn't touched it all day. Couldn't eat it now. I'm allergic to mango. I tossed it in the trash. Looked up to see Betty standing there, eyes piercing into me. She glanced between me and the trash, her lips a thin line. Betty's office is on a high floor. She rarely comes to my department. What was she doing here? Dave soon answered this question by linking his arm with Betty's. Betty, I told you to wait for me in the garage. Bad optics coming to the office. I didn't get a word in. The room filled with disapproving murmurs. They're my team members that I've trained myself. They obviously didn't like Dave's attitude. Betty swept a cold gaze around. Silence followed. When Betty left the office, she didn't come back that night. Before, I'd worry, call her endlessly, demand where she went. But this time I didn't. Just went to bed, went to work as usual. Who would have thought she wouldn't show at work the next day? Nor did Dave. That night Betty came home. I was finishing dinner and heading upstairs. She clutched my hand, questioning, aren't you going to ask where I've been? I looked at her calmly. How do you want me to ask? She suddenly got mad. Calvin, you weren't like this before. I thought about it and nodded. You used to be like me before. She looked down and softened her tone. I drank too much yesterday and slept at the hotel. Nothing happened between Dave and me. Finishing her sentence, she seemed a bit wronged. I drank so much, and you didn't even bother to call me. I wasn't sure what game she was playing. She used to hate it when I called her. Her guilty look was almost comical. The next day, I got a message from Dave. It was a health report. The diagnosis was a chronic illness that required long-term treatment. And there was a picture of Betty with Dave at the hospital. I froze right there. Turns out, she wasn't at work yesterday but was with Dave at the hospital. Though a bit shocked, I accepted it. There's been something brewing between them for a while. Hasn't there? I replied to Dave. We were just together the night before last. And today this? That's quick. The reply came fast. Can't you read the date? Forgot the day. Let me remind you. Our anniversary day. What was he talking about? Betty made time for me that day. Though she didn't usually care about anniversaries, she did that time for me. That day I was sick and went to bed early. She showed rare patience with me. Stayed by my side. Gave me medicine. Wiped my sweat. Even though I was sick, my heart felt sweet. I thought, after all these years, I finally warmed her heart. She was starting to show love. But in the middle of the night, I woke up thirsty and found she wasn't beside me. I called out, but she didn't answer. I thought she just went downstairs to get some water, but I soon fell back asleep. Was it that day? It seemed sweet, but had a bitter aftertaste. Turns out she went to see Dave that night. Should I congratulate them and then gracefully bow out? Calvin, you'll congratulate me, right? Dave texted again. I ignored it, focusing on the project close to completion at hand. Slowly, I pushed the incident out of my mind. Until lunchtime when Betty brought Dave to see me. Betty slammed her phone on my desk. It made a thunderous noise that startled everyone in the office. On the phone were those 2 pictures Dave sent me. Calvin, did you do this? She asked angrily. I didn't understand. How could I worsen his condition? I wondered, could they really twist things like this against me? Betty took a deep breath. I'm talking about you putting Dave's issue on the company forum. I was confused. Why would I do that? It's not my business. I have no motive. If you didn't do it, who did? So-and-so only told you about it. You knew too, didn't you? He knew too, didn't he? Why assume it's me? Who else would want to ruin him so badly? I snorted. Why think it's me? She'd trust Dave blindly and suspect me unconditionally for him. How could I have ruined him? I wasn't accepting that blame. Betty was about to say more, but Dave cut her off. Calvin, I felt helpless about this situation. In the company, besides Betty, I don't know anyone else. I wanted to share it with you. I scoffed. You sure know how to pick someone to share with. Huh? Couldn't find your dad or mom to share? His face turned pale, whispering in disbelief. Calvin, I considered you a friend. A friend? Like whatever he had with Betty. Betty couldn't bear it. Enough. You don't know what he's been through. And you treat him like this. How can you be so ruthless? Ruthless. After 7 years together, that was her take on me. What did his troubles have to do with me? Betty's voice turned colder when she heard me say that. Delete the post today, or you're out of the company. After they left, I slumped into my seat. The post wasn't mine to delete. How could I delete it? Betty actually wanted me out of the company. This isn't just because of her. It's my sweat and effort too. When she started the business, I stood by her. We ate stale bread together, lived in a basement. After her first business failed, I worked 3 jobs to pay her debts. I was there from the start at the project department. Worked hard every day, rose to project manager. Betty appointed Dave as deputy manager, and overnight, Dave quickly took the path I spent years on. Turns out this is how it is. She wants to kick me out to make way for Dave. Colleagues gathered around, offering kind words. Does Betty really think Dave's better than Calvin? I knew they meant well. I thanked them, sent them back to work. I didn't stay sad for long, continued focusing on my work. Until quitting time. Tomorrow is the weekend. Perfect time to move out. I found a place online this week, talked it over with the landlord. Move tomorrow, settle in. Most of my stuff is already packed. Apart from my clothes, I've left everything else. Breaking up, after all, one must be clear. Betty didn't come home tonight either. That's how it's been since our fights. Her numerous assets give her plenty of places to stay. Unlike me, guarding this empty villa alone. But I don't want to do that anymore. Monday morning at work, Betty texted me. Why haven't you deleted the post? It won't end well if I do. I looked at the message, paused. It seems Betty doesn't love Dave much. Having him hang out to dry for 2 days. I heard someone uploaded the incident online. The comments tearing Dave apart are something. Though I've been too busy to pay much attention. Finally, I replied patiently to Betty. It wasn't me. How can I delete it? Did I forget to break up with you? Let me fix that. Betty, let's break up. I wanted to talk to her in person last night. But no matter how long I waited, she didn't come home. Maybe it's for the best. Before I even got into the office, I heard Betty's angry voice. Where's Calvin? Why isn't he here yet? As soon as I opened the door, her yell made me stumble, almost falling over. Luckily, Vivian helped steady me in time. You okay? You look so pale. Feeling sick? If you're not okay, you should go home and rest, she said. I shook my head, refusing her concern. Seeing us, Betty shot up from her chair, glaring at our linked arms. Why are you two together? Calvin, come here. I nodded at her and headed over to the H group's area. Betty stared at me, eyes wide. What do you mean? That's the H group seat. I nodded again. Then I'm in the right spot. You're siding with H group against me? Vivian's always been Betty's rival. Bitter enemies in the business world. It's no shock Betty's surprised I'm backing Vivian. Forget? I've already quit. I finalized everything last Friday. If I didn't take down that post, I'd be fired anyway. You owe me severance, I said. Betty was speechless. You could have taken it down. I was just angry, she insisted. I didn't take her words as just angry words, and ignored her. Sitting across from us, Betty kept staring, her expression like she'd caught a cheating spouse. The bidding meeting began. Dave led a group. I was in charge for H group. I used to handle such things at the company, and Dave's new with little experience. He's barely been to these meetings making stuttering speeches. As expected, H group won the bid. Dave stopped me. Calvin, why'd you move to H group? You're breaching your non-compete agreement. I crossed my arms. Thanks to you, though I didn't sign a non-compete. Just a regular contract. Betty never thought I'd leave, and neither did I. So, no non-compete between us. Dave looked righteous. You're way out of line helping H group against us. You were Betty's boyfriend. I smirked. Isn't that all thanks to you? Betty stepped up. Vivian instinctively blocked me. Seeing this, Betty clenched her jaw, repeating fine thrice in anger. Fine, Calvin, don't regret this. With that, she dragged Dave away. We ran into them again in the garage. Betty, furious, slammed her car door. Calvin, you've been up to something with her, haven't you? That's why you left so suddenly. I glanced at her, speaking coolly. If that's what you think, I can't change it. My calm demeanor made her angrier. Turns out, she couldn't handle being treated like that. I told you, Calvin seems honest, but he's sneaky. Dave butted in. Betty snapped at him. Enough. Back off my boyfriend. Betty, why are you getting angry with me? Vivian chuckled, raising her eyebrow. Don't misjudge. I reached out to Calvin many times. Betty's face changed, grabbing Vivian's collar. Say that again. Vivian kept smiling, but he always said no. He's loyal to you and a group. Thanks for the chance. Couldn't poach him without it. Betty was stunned. Vivian pushed her gently aside, fixing her clothes. Thanks. As the car pulled away, through the rearview mirror I saw Betty still standing there. 3 days passed before she realized I'd moved out. Finding me wouldn't be tough for her, even if I blocked all her contacts. Seeing me, she tried to defend herself. I answered coldly, it doesn't matter anymore. I turned away, looking out the window. Betty, panicked, grasped my hand. What doesn't matter? Neither what's true nor you matter anymore. Her voice cracked. Don't joke around. We'll marry and be a family. I followed her for 7 years, wanting to get married. But she wanted a career first, so we chased that dream. Then she said our foundation was unstable, needing more work. Then, when we were stable, Dave showed up. She never promised marriage. I followed her willingly. Turned out, she and Dave had feelings for each other. I chose to let go. I pulled my hand away. We're not getting married. Her expression froze. What do you mean? You're heartless. I said nothing as she glared at me intensely. Why? Why are you doing this? Because of Dave? I told you we're not involved. I stayed calm. Then why didn't you clear up the rumors about you and Dave on the company forum? It was about his reputation, I said. His reputation matters, mine doesn't. So, you think I put him on the forum? Look at what he sent me. I showed her messages from Dave. She wasn't surprised, meaning she knew he contacted me. That night of October 23rd was our anniversary. Where were you? Betty avoided my eyes. Without checking, you blamed me for putting him on the forum? He wouldn't do that to himself. You have no idea what he went through. I was taken aback. How is this my fault too? That night, feverish and foggy, I hadn't noticed if my calls reached her. But why blame me? Why shove all the blame my way when I did nothing? The truth came out. She was furious. But we never blamed you, did we? I actually laughed in anger. It felt like the first time I truly saw the person I'd loved for years. Turns out this is who she really is. In the end, we parted on bad terms. Later, the IP from that post was traced back to Dave. He was the one who posted it. The whole company was in an uproar. The tech guy who uncovered it came to me for help. I rubbed my forehead, feeling pretty helpless. Fine. One more doesn't make a difference. Lately, quite a few people from my former company have reached out. Most of them are old employees from when the company first started. Everyone has taken note of how Betty conducts herself and her work. Once the company got going, she really started acting like she owned the place. I've always been in the trenches, leading the team and taking on projects. I realized gradually that I'd earned quite a bit of trust. Most of my team followed me when I left. Now the project department is just Dave standing alone. I took some time off to rest and recover at home. The security here is pretty solid. Betty probably hasn't figured out where I'm living. I didn't expect to see her waiting outside the office building. Just as I exit the lobby, there she is walking toward me. Calvin, I swear I didn't know Dave posted that on the forum. Can you forgive me? I shoved my hands in my pockets. Didn't know? Or didn't want to know? She probably didn't even bother to check because she didn't want to ruin her image of Dave. All it would take is one word from Betty to look into this internal matter. I didn't want to waste any more time arguing with her. As I tried to step around her, she grabbed my arm. I looked at her stern profile, noticing the redness in her eyes. Yeah, just like I don't want to trust you, just like you don't trust me. Is there a problem? She looked hurt. Why are you treating me this way? Familiar, isn't it? You've always treated me this way. Now that the tables are turned, she's unhappy. Betty stared at me, trying to find a trace of love for her in my eyes. But she failed. She seemed utterly defeated. Calvin, stop giving me the cold shoulder. Please, come back. Okay? I promise I won't keep in touch with him anymore. I honestly don't love him. Back when I was down, he left me for another woman abroad. Now I've finally become the person he wanted to climb the social ladder with. I just wanted to feel a bit proud in front of him. Calvin, the only person I love is you. That was the first time I'd heard her say she loved me since we'd been together all these years. And it happened after I stopped loving her. I remembered how Dave rushed back from abroad when he heard Betty had made it big. She and Dave got pretty close. Her business partners asked her, if she loved Dave, why did she stay with me? What did she say back then? She said when Dave left her, he wasn't willing to endure hardships with her. So she found someone who would just to show him. I've definitely endured my share of hardships for her over the years. She did win one over Dave with that. No wonder she suddenly started dating me in college. She must have known I worked multiple jobs to pay for school. She probably carefully considered and chose me for my tenacity. I chuckled to myself. After playing the role of one who endures hardships, I'm not part of the enjoying life chapter. She can love whoever she wants. I'm done with it. I shrugged her hand off. But I don't love you anymore, Betty. With long strides, I walked forward. The hem of my coat slipped from her grip. Just a brief pause and no more connections. Just like us. 7 years of love, ending so lightly. It hasn't really affected my life much. I just moved to a different place, found a new job. It's not all that different. Life goes on with or without someone. When I first realized there was something going on between Betty and Dave, I got angry and fought. I even doubted myself, wondering if maybe I really wasn't good enough. Why else couldn't I make Betty fall in love with me after 7 years? Later, I realized it wasn't like that at all. She never loved me from the start. This whole relationship was just my personal joyride. Do I hate them? I asked myself. Maybe a little at first. I couldn't understand why they treated me that way. But I made peace with it. I chose her and I chose to love her. Love is about the process, the joy, not the end result. I can love deeply, and I can handle the loss. Besides, working with Betty over the years taught me a lot. Otherwise, as a kid from the countryside, I wouldn't have reached this position. Vivian walked over, standing beside me, looking out over the city. What's there to see? Calvin snagged another big project. Want to go grab a drink after work? This project was snatched from Betty's company. Mainly because Betty's company can't handle big projects now. After I left, many veteran employees were disheartened. Afraid she'd throw them under the bus once their use was over, many followed me out, including several key members. Now her company is in shambles. Several projects have gone south, and they've incurred substantial penalties for breach of contract. I've heard they can't get any funding now. If they don't get it together soon, they'll have to file for bankruptcy and restructure. Initially, she still tried reaching out, saying she'd fire Dave, wanted me back, even offering shares. But no matter what she offers, I won't be swayed again. Just like before, when we started the business together, it wasn't about succeeding but rather about the person. Now that her company is in crisis, and the pressure's on, she has no time to look for me anymore. As for Dave, after being let go, his posts on the company's forum got leaked online. It blew up and he was condemned everywhere. A lot of people outed him. Turns out this wasn't his first time being the other man. He's been at it since college. He went abroad because one of his sugar mama's husbands discovered him, and she had no choice but to send him away. Didn't expect his escapades abroad to be exposed too. He's a real player. Now he's become a target, despised and shunned by everyone. Desperate, he reached out to Betty. That's when Betty realized her sacred white moonlight was all an illusion. They had a fight, and Betty ended up pushing Dave down the stairs. He's paralyzed now, and Dave's family sued Betty. She got sentenced to 10 years. I didn't attend the trial. As I passed by her company, I saw them taking down the sign. It stirred some feelings in me. Vivian crossed her arms, standing next to me, teasing. "What's up? Can't let go of your old company? Calvin, are you torn?" Her teasing washed away any nostalgia I felt. I smirked. "Well, that's that. The old company's gone. Now Vivian doesn't have to worry about me leaving." "Huh?" Vivian laughed. True. So, wanna grab that drink?" I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, let's do it. Though I've been hurt by love, I'm not afraid. I still have the ability to chase new horizons and the courage to embrace the next love."